welcome to Virtually Yours. You are our number 23rd guest.
Yay! And I was born on the 23rd, so must be a lucky number. Thank you for having me. I'm excited
An
about our
absolute
conversation.
pleasure. Everybody in the audience, you know how we do it. Can you start by telling us, just put in the comments where you are joining us from and how you are. And Sue, I am going to start by asking you, while everybody is doing that, so that we know who's joining us from across the world, by asking you to read a little excerpt for us to tease us into this book that has had everybody on tenterhooks, which frankly is my favorite of your novels.
Zuki, sorry to disappoint you. I still haven't found an excerpt, but can I ask you to read my favorite one?
What is your
Because
favorite?
I know you'll do the accents well. So it's the OAU one, where I literally personified all the countries as ladies, and they're sitting around on the table. It's yeah.
Which section is that? You didn't describe it very well, ma'am.
it's, it's,
I think
it's
you
just
should stick to
before
writing instead of speaking.
it's just before independence, when Zimbabwe gains independence. So
Okay.
yeah, when Ethiopia speaks,
Oh, all
um
right.
I don't remember what the chapter title was, but yeah, I really enjoyed writing that chapter. But I think it's
Okay.
nice, if you do the voice. Do you know how to do a Nigerian accent, Zuki?
I don't know. Nigerians think I sound Nigerian when I'm there, but I lose it when I'm not there.
So I think you'd be able
Right.
to capture everyone's. Yeah, I think you'd be animated enough to pull it off.
Okay. Right. Bear with me, guys. I should be able to. Mm, hey, you packed so much in this book, eh? And
I
okay,
was
I'm at
also
the
trying to
second
educate myself. Yeah.
I'm at the second independence celebration now. So let's see, Kami Prison. Battle of Intabane. Okay, so I'm seeing I think I'm very close now. I am at the marriage of convenience, the democratic dream.
Yeah, I think it would be.
I'm very close. I'm at Bob Marley.
No, it would be before that.
Yeah, no, I know it's before that. I'm just going
Yeah.
backwards.
I'm busy in the chat here. You have a Bulawayo girl.
Okay, homecoming, ceasefire. So prior to that, okay, I think I'm almost there. Right. It was at the first. The OAU was a small, intimate group of 16 states that used their collective power to not legitimize the Mickey Mouse government constituted by Smith and his motley crew. It was at the first Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting held in August 1979 that the frontline states made their position very clear. Margaret Thatcher had just come to power in Britain, and it was her ascension that this was to have the greatest impact on changing the fortunes of Rhodesia. She had zero empathy for the Patriotic Front and referred to them as terrorists like the IRA. The Patriotic Front is the only legitimate party that represents the interests of all Zimbabweans, said Zambia, draped in a red kitenge with blue geometric squares. Tanzania nodded in agreement, her kofia almost toppling over. She wore a loose-fitting white kanzu that swept the floor. Zambia was hosting the delegate in Lusaka, despite the fact that a war continued to rage in her backyard. Up until then, Nigeria had not spoken, but she blasted into the conversation with authority. She was a buxom beauty, big-breasted, with big buttocks. When she walked, the corridors of power shook. Her head was draped in a headdress that matched her orange Ashoka print dress, with a pleated umbrella gele forming a halo around her head. We can't have this nonsense, she declared, waving a large manicured hand in the air. The gold chains on her wrist clanked noisily together. She had gold chains draped around her neck, some disappearing into her bosom. Her ears were pulled down by the weight of her gold earrings. Britain side-eyed her, thinking her to be rather gaudy. She, in contrast, looked rather prim and proper in a white Percival blouse teamed with a tailored blue jacket and matching pencil skirt. She wore a strand of pearls that she played with as discussion unfolded. She spoke in a low and measured voice, carefully pronouncing each syllable. It is for the benefit of everyone here to support the settlement and put an end to this Rhodesian debacle. Britain was tired. Her last colonial outpost was behaving like a typical last born, causing trouble and prone to throwing tantrums. She wanted to shake the African dust and never have to set foot on African soil again. Listen, maybe you didn't hear us the first time. We will not support any settlement that doesn't include Nkomo or Mugabe. I make no joke, oh. If you support this stupidity, Nigeria will stop having all British goods and services. And I mean all. Britain winced, and the other OAU states watched as she twitched nervously in her seat. Everyone in that room was aware that Nigeria was the biggest consumer of British exports. Nigeria knew her strength. She had black gold in the form of the oil fields of the Niger Delta, and Abuja nestled between her thighs. With the click of her gold-adorned fingers, Nigeria went on to nationalize the assets of British Petroleum in protest so as to curb the supply of oil to Rhodesia and South Africa. She didn't stop there and went on to flood the markets with millions of pounds sterling, which sent the stalwart currency into jitters and nervousness. I don't joke, repeated Nigeria, making a hissing sound with her lips. Support Smith and see what we'll do. Britain needed no further prompting. She knew where her toasted bread was buttered. She addressed her counterparts and reiterated that the Crown had every intention to grant Rhodesian independence, but it would not happen under the current circumstances. She pointed out the flaws in the proposed constitution, which she said were not representative of the country's demographics. With pursed lips, she would not legitimize the new state. Her inaugural address was met with wild applause. Afterwards, Australia, Jamaica, and Zambia rallied around her. They egged her on to convene another conference to outline the modalities for a new Rhodesia. Basking in their adoration and wanting to ride on the momentum, she agreed. That was how the Lancaster House Agreement came into being, with Britain as the venerable host. Robert Mugabe, leader of the ZANU party, was a reluctant participant and felt these meetings were diverting his attention from the war on the ground. He was quite happy directing the war effort from his villa in Maputo, where I am. Had things gone his way, he would have continued the war until the last man standing. The way he saw it, Rhodesia would eventually capitulate. Nevertheless, it was the combined pressure of Samora Machel of Mozambique and Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia who made him relent. The effects of a protracted war were taking their toll on their individual economies. They threatened to close the Zipra bases in Zambia and the Zanda bases in Mozambique if the two did not present a united front and show up at the talks. It was no secret that Mugabe and Nkomo loathed each other. 47 plenary sessions later, over a period of 3 months of haggling and heckling, the Lancaster Agreement came into effect and brought the war to a decisive end, there were no victors. It was a brokered peace settlement. Right, Sue.
Thank you,
Why did you
Zuki.
decide on that particular excerpt?
I enjoyed writing it in the sense that what I did there was I made all the countries, I personified them as females,
Mm.
using, different characteristics that represent those countries. It was just fun to write. It was one of those fun passages. But writing about a serious event in history in a
Which I
comical
suppose,
way.
makes sense since we often hear our countries referred to as the continent referred to as Mother Africa, and you know,
Exactly.
and so forth and so on. Okay, so critics say of this, your fourth novel, that it is a perfect matchup of historical narrative and contemporary with a touch of surrealism.
Mhm.
And by critics, I mean me. Tell
Okay.
us a little bit more about the process of you writing this particular book, how it differed from everything else. I think I read somewhere that it took you a while. It's probably the first book that you thought of writing, or that you had already been writing. Tell us
Yes.
about the process of this particular book, because it was very ambitious, and I really honestly loved it, that you didn't miss a historical thing in Zimbabwe's history.
So I actually started writing this book story at that time, between a
Mm,
black girl and a white boy. And
mm,
when I wrote the first draft of it, it was called Skeletons in the Closet at the time, but it had no history. It didn't have the
mm,
historical element. It was just a love story that played out in Rhodesia, which later became Zimbabwe.
mm,
So it's when I picked up, the manuscript years later, I that was the glaring thing to me because a lot of things were happening in the background and a lot of things that, whilst I lived through them, I wasn't even aware of them. And it spoke to my own ignorance in the sense that even when I was in high school, we didn't learn African history. We learned European history, and we didn't read, African literature. So my world was very devoid of the Africanness and the African history. So
mm.
I wanted to educate myself on what happened during those years, and even people who studied African history said they felt that it wasn't really the true picture of our history. So then I decided, I need to learn and try to understand how we got here, how Zimbabwe was birthed. And so there then began the research. So for a year I spent, just reading different texts on Zimbabwean history and reading also I researched on, documentaries, watched documentaries, you know, spoke to people in my family, especially went to the war. And yeah, it was just a year of research first. And then because I had that manuscript, the draft, it was then easy now to try and weave the history into it. And so that's really what I did. So it was taking a story that was already and then, adding the historical aspect to it.
I actually studied African history, like in Zim, and I remember that the history was, of course, in two phases. There was the Zimbabwean history rather was in two phases. There was the Chimurenga one, which just seemed to focus on, the Neanda and Mapondera and so forth, and then Chimurenga two, which very much focused not so much as we know on the Wange, which was one of, and Chipolio, which were the first things that happened, but it focused more on Zimbabwe African National Union and the Zanla
Mhm.
forces, and so there was more of a focus on Chimoyo. So it was interesting for me because although I was born in Zambia, it was only through reading your book that I actually got to know about the Mkushi bombings, and
Mhm.
I had to actually call my mom and ask her about that. So that was absolutely brilliantly done. But you, in all this, one of the things that I absolutely also really admired regarding the way you brought the history together was, I know because you're from Bulawayo, it would have been so easy to just run with the one narrative, but you actually managed to balance the history of the country of Zimbabwe, where you had what was happening in Chimoyo, and what was happening in Kushi, and what was happening with Zipra forces, and what was happening Zanla forces. How difficult was that to be able to get all that material in 1 year, for instance?
It wasn't difficult. There's actually a lot of material. And what I found is a lot of the Rhodesian armies or the squads, the special forces, um, really had a great record in terms of detail. So
Okay.
even in the books that I read, there would be maps of the camps, which I found it was then easy to describe because I could literally maneuver using the maps that were provided and actually get a sort of an aerial view of what was on the ground, even though I wasn't there. So there were a lot of detail. They had a lot of intelligence that they left with, which then they used to write all these books. So I actually found it very riveting. I mean, I won't lie, Zuki. I got carried away when I was doing the research because it was just like I actually thought, maybe I should be writing a non-fiction book because it was so interesting. But
No,
it was also
it is very riveting. But this is where I need to ask you, like, where, because you managed to carry through this history of this particular family, these two particular families on this, through their progeny, and you carried it through right from the beginning, right to the end, and everybody who met and everything that happened to them, and be true to that particular history without be true to that particular narrative, and keep us like on our toes and interested in their lives, despite the fact that you had all this historical material that you could have run away with and just like messed us all up instead of like keeping engaged. How did you decide, how did you manage to sift through where you're like, okay, this is the historical stuff that I'm gonna take, and this I'm gonna leave out? Although, I know, like you, that sometimes it gets really tempting because you're like, oh my God, this is so exciting. This is interesting. I want everybody to read that. So how did you manage to do that balance?
so I think where I didn't manage it, my editor just cut it out. She was like, no, no, no. This is not we're going off on a tangent here. So,
Mm,
I mean, she was brutal. So she cut out a lot of things, but I'm happy with those cuts because it really streamlined, because like I'm saying, it's easy to get carried away. But it was also
mm,
important for me, Zuki, to show three sides of the story of our liberation struggle. It wasn't just one narrative. And it was
mm,
important to show, from the different POVs of people living in Zimbabwe. And that, it wasn't just a Zanla war, it was also a Zipra war. And
mm.
and and I also wanted
And
to
then there were people who
focus.
were non-aligned,
Yes,
who didn't
exactly.
have, so
Yes,
people like Kiwa and Mabusi, who ended up like being caught up in the process.
casualties. Yes.
Uh-huh.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and it was also important to spotlight women because a lot of
Mm,
the times when we speak of women in the war, it's either they're servicing men sexually or they're feeding
mm,
them. But it was
mm,
also important to show that there were women in combat who actually
mm,
went and trained. And it's important to show we shouldn't erase them from history. So that was also another attempt of mine to try and highlight the role women played. And like you say, Mgushi, not many people know about that,
mm.
and I feel like we need to highlight that as well.
Yeah. Um, right. Tell me about Melanie. I've been like in this space regarding Melanie because Melanie reminds me of so many liberal characters that I've met, because Melanie seems to know the right thing to do. But here she is with Paul, and Paul is a rabid racist.
Yeah,
How, how,
opposites
how,
attract.
you know, Melanie is a rich kid. She could have just like decided to return to South Africa. Why did she? What was it? She was in love with Paul, and he made her feel better about herself, or what was the story there?
I think they were both. It was a rebound kind of thing, and
Okay.
and remember, it was more like she didn't want to return to the oppression of South Africa. She thought maybe Rhodesia offered a better
Well, yeah, but when she arrived, she
And
realized that it was no better.
it's actually
In fact, she was dealing with it in her own family, you know?
yeah. So yeah, so I think it was like probably, I've made my bed, let me lie in it, even if there are some nails, she kind of made the most of it, I feel like. But Melanie is a
I,
favorite. I think a lot of people like her. I mean, a
I
lot of
didn't
readers.
actually. She annoyed me. I
She
wanted to
annoyed.
slap her. Slap her like, girl, you know what Paul is like and his brother. Why are you accepting the brother in the house? We know why
Yeah.
you're Paul, but yeah. Ish. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I
So
was like
yeah.
this. What a roller coaster. I was like, yeah, no. You did the most of the feelings, man. You know?
But
And
Paul, did your heart change towards him?
I, I think it didn't really, like, I mean, maybe a little bit, not that
Mhm.
much. And part of the reason why is because uh, I think Paul gets into a space where he realizes nobody. So if any of his children had wanted the farm,
Mhm.
and had been invested in the farm, he probably wouldn't have uh, taken a look at Angel or
Okay.
invested in her. So he was being opportunistic, really, you know.
So you didn't think he was altruistic in his motives?
No, I think he was being opportunistic, man. And that Paul was just like, yeah, no, at least I know her, at least I raised her. Let me give this to
Mhm.
her, type of thing, right?
Yeah, that's a nice angle
General
to it.
Yoka, please,
Mm.
because we're coming there.
Yeah.
So, how did you decide? So to the people in the audience, there's a character in the book who gets into an accident, and it's caused by a guy who's a general, and so what Sue I know has been getting asked a lot of is like, who is this? And anybody with like a modicum of sort of contemporary, uh, recent history and more contemporary Zimbabwean, readings and stuff will see that there's a bunch of like characters. You made the general quite a few characters, and you decided you were going
Yes.
to take.
That
Um,
was deliberate.
yes, I
That
know
was
that
very
because you
deliberate.
didn't want to
Yeah.
you didn't want to get in trouble, obviously. You still want
Yeah.
to go to Zimbabwe for the holidays.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I think I really enjoyed, in fact, about all of them, all of your characters, was how well drawn out they are. So nobody is ever really truly good, and nobody is ever truly bad.
Yeah.
Even as horrible as the general is, he's like, how like they always say on television, a serial killer, uh, even as neighbors will say, "Oh, you used to be so nice to the dog," type of thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you manage to show General Nyoka being so nice to the dog every now and again, and being
Mm.
affectionate and stuff. Uh, how difficult was it, particularly when you know the history of the country that you are writing in, and there is a narrative so often of the evil that a lot of these men in power do towards people. How difficult was it to humanize uh, a General Nyoka, for instance,
It
or
wasn't really
even
difficult.
even 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 Paul's brother, the Salute Scout
Even
guy?
Paul's brother, Graham. So the thing is, Zuki, it wasn't really difficult because even if you read, if often these leaders that pass on,
Mm.
whether they're brutal during their regimes, you always get like even when the wives, the obituaries from the wives, the family members are very different from how the public
So,
experience
in
them.
fairness, so the wives are usually like, um, they're very stoic. But if it's in any African country anyway, they have to say nice things. Otherwise, people will think they're the ones who killed him.
Yeah, but the children, but Zuki, the children. No, it's true. I mean, women always. gets us, they're prime suspects, right? When it comes to
Yeah.
husbands dying. But
Mm.
I always find the children interesting in the way they
Mm.
speak about their fathers and the relationships they have. There's that tenderness that always comes out. And I always think that we experience people differently depending on our relationship to them. So that's
With
why
them.
I feel like they're not always, on 24/7 on that evil super mode. There's another side to them, the
Mm.
gentle, tender side. And so I really believe that we do experience people differently. It's just like you'll meet someone and think they're such a lovely person because of your experience of them. And I could meet the same person and think, what an asshole. So it's how we experience people. We don't necessarily experience. And I think people are different with different versions of themselves depending on where they are, or who they're with.
Mhm.
So yeah,
I have to tell
excuse me
you,
for swearing. Yeah.
I think it's adult company. I have to say, one of the things that I realized you were a nicer person than I am as a writer because
Mhm.
that particular scene of you have a scene where Angel goes and meets up with Bradley, who she's been having a relationship with for a very long time. Mm, her first love, her only love, really.
Mhm.
But now she's married to somebody else, and he's married to somebody else, and she goes and she meets up with him. And this is how you're kinder than me as a writer, because I would have had them getting caught before they had sex. Pre-coitus.
Zuki, you're cruel for sure. Okay.
I mean, I'm like, and then it kind of like comes to where it's like, oh my god, why am I dying for this, like type of thing, right? But yeah, I actually would have been that that sadistic. But this particular relationship, which I know everybody who has read the book probably wants to hear about, you know, this kids grow up like siblings. So in some way, I kind of felt like I felt some other kind of way, regarding this particular relationship, you know. Um, and I can understand perhaps Paul's anger towards it, you know. Um, how did you justify it when you were doing this relationship?
Look, the thing is, they weren't related, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
we strip it down, but they are related in the sense that she's been adopted into this family,
Mm,
and she is like, a brother. But I mean, if you think of the relationship that they had, he
mm,
even as a young boy, Bradley always was caring over Angel. He showed her care. But it's one of those other things as well that to bring tension, because some people love the relationship and some people hate it. Some people feel it's incestuous and it should never have happened. So it also is also one of those tension things, like with the reader. Do I buy into this or don't I? Um,
yeah. No, I suppose there is the concept where, I think quite a few in certain families we do grow up with um, family members who are not family members, like when there's been an orphan and then they're abandoned and then they become adopted into your family. So I think there was that. Um, but so you have this modernism, you have this young lass who goes to girls' college, because I thought she was at girls' college myself. And then she goes to she goes to University of Pretoria and does her farming and whatever. Um, and she does this, and of course when she goes to University of Pretoria, she does this turnaround, which
mhm,
where she then becomes this militant uh, black. She realizes that she's black
mhm,
at some point in time, but she soon realizes that almost she's on her own because she doesn't. Um, Was this something that you observed, or is this something that, you know, is this something that just came to you and you thought, well, how would this work?
No, this is actually something that I've observed, and I actually spoke, interviewed a girl who was raised in
Mm,
a white family,
mm,
as well as part of the research. And yeah, she was telling me how it's been a struggle, identity wise, to try
mm.
and fit in with black people. And even now, she says she has struggles dating black men, and
Okay.
so it's actually something that's very real. And I also did a bit of research around black kids who are adopted into white families and the struggles they have in terms of identity and assimilation. Then the other thing you've just reminded me why the whole love story between Angel and Bradley as well. I mean, if you look at their family, Mabusi
Mm,
and
mm,
Kiwa were,
mm.
were raped by these white
Yeah,
men, right?
yeah.
But we have generations later where these two, is it consensual? Or do you feel that Bradley also took advantage of her? If
Took
we look at
advantage
that
of her.
narrative,
Yeah.
of
No,
that
no.
the
I think
relationship.
that was yeah, that was part of my discomfort. Almost as if she might have been groomed, and like almost. I kept thinking that replaying what you call it, Gregory Williams.
Mm-hmm,
He was like the reincarnation of his grandfather. You know,
mm-hmm,
which kind of reminded me of somebody who said many years ago that uh, they thought something that I'd said was unrealistic about a man who had an affair with his domestic worker. To which
mm-hmm.
to which I questioned, where do you think a lot of the biracial children that we have in Southern Africa come
Came
from?
from.
But
Mm-hmm,
it was I think sometimes there is the disconnect just because it hasn't happened to you.
mm-hmm.
You don't
To you, yes.
really think
Or
about
you're
the
not exposed
worldview.
to it, yes.
Yeah, so you
Mm-hmm,
aren't exposed to it, so then you get surprised. And Gregory is another very interesting, character.
mm-hmm,
And I think he is the guy who is originally, you know decides it's gonna come to Rhodesia, and gets this piece of land and starts this farm. But then he, as they say, goes native. and
mm-hmm.
and when he goes native, first it's rape, but it's also interesting that you did a fantastic take, and we've seen this over and over and over again in literature and in testimonies and in research of how uh, he rapes this woman, but he rapes this woman who's a domestic worker, but it's the wife uh, hold her hold the victim,
Mm-hmm.
um, decides that the
Accountable.
victim it's the victim yeah the victim is it's the victim's fault, and part of that is I've often thought that part of that is the hypersexualization of black bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to happen also with Gregory's wife, but it's also where the main there's there are many characters, and one could say the main character in this book, we could say, okay, it's Angel and Bradley and their love relationship, which you said was really originally your idea. But I kind of felt like the main character of this book was the farm.
Yes, it is.
you know
Or
that was
yeah, the
that
farm
was
also
yeah
becomes, yes.
that was the most, what you call it, because it is what leads to Kiwa and Mabusi coming back. And
Mm,
and I thought that you did that very beautifully. The visits from the Lozis, like just always
yes.
being there with, you know. Um, how did you think? Oh my God, am I going to isolate my Christian or Muslim readers with this, or how did you deal with that African spirituality bit?
So initially, how the idea came, Zuki, is, a lot of my readers always say, you kill our favorite characters, you always
Mm,
break our hearts. So I thought to
mm,
myself, okay, I can't be breaking people's hearts. Death doesn't need to be final. There's life after death. And so these
Mm,
characters can actually exist in perpetuity. They don't have to die, they can
mm,
come back as spirits. And I was saying, depending on what your belief system is, you might think they're demons, or you could think they're angels or madlozi. You would ascribe anything to them, depending on what you believe. And
mm,
so that's why I decided to go there with them and
mm,
take it there,
mm,
because there's that other life that, we often don't explore. So that's why I took the book there. And then the other thing with that as well was those two, Mabusi and Kiwa, were powerless in that
mm.
world that they inhabited whilst they
In the
lived.
first world, yeah.
Yes, but once they're in the afterlife, they have a power that they didn't possess. They don't have the
Mm.
same barriers, and they become very powerful women. And so I like that idea of them living and doing powerful things and eventually murdering someone in the book. So yeah, so it was a good way to do it as well.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
No,
Have you ever seen a tokolosh?
no, not at all. But I do, I do believe in the
Mm,
spiritual realm. I believe there's
okay.
another realm. Yeah, so I do believe in that.
Okay, all right. No, no, no. I wanted to check on that so that we see what our parameters for this discussion are.
Yeah,
Our paranormal parameters,
it
as it
is.
were.
Yeah.
Anyway, people in the audience, do please ask questions if you would like. I am, as you know, here with Nyathi. And we are, wow, okay. This conversation has gone very fast, Sue. It's
Yeah,
22. I didn't realize that was the time, you know?
yeah. It's
And I
been very
haven't even
interesting.
allowed
Yeah.
people to ask questions. Guys, please feel free to ask questions to Sue. Um, and Sue, you came from finance, and then you decided, let's just talk about your journey. This is your fourth novel, so welcome to fourth novel things.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
uh, and you came into, you wanted to do journalism, but then you decided, because there wasn't journalism in Zim, you decided you were going to go into finance, and then you decided that you didn't want to be a rich person and decided that you wanted to be poor. So you left finance and went into writing, you know. And I mean, there was a time when you straddled both worlds and you actually had a chance to be a rich writer. Tell us more about this.
So actually, the decision to go into finance was my parents, because, like you say, they said
Mm,
writers struggle financially. It's not
mm,
something you can survive on, and they weren't
mm,
lying. So I think, and yeah, so when I made that decision, it was largely them, right? And it
mm,
makes sense, if you think about the lives of most writers, Wiki. I mean, it's not a financially lucrative career unless you've won awards, or you're a Damon Galgut or Ben Okri. It's for the average writer. There are not many
mm,
Chimamandas, out there. We know the
mm,
reality. So yeah, so I understand the thinking behind that. But I think it became very difficult in balancing the investment broking and the writing. And I
mm,
kind of felt like I've done this for almost, over 15 years. Let's see what the writing can do for me. If it doesn't work, I can always leave it. It was one of those things. I just didn't want to have regrets to say could have, would have kind of thing.
okay.
And I sort of gave myself a timeline that it must pay off. So I'm not doing this just for the fun of it. It must pay off. so,
Oh,
so yeah.
that's a, that's a,
So
that's
that was
a,
the
that's a
strategy.
great idea. And I think one
Yeah.
of the things that I've admired about how you've decided to take your writing career is you're not just like sitting and saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna write novels or whatever it is, or short stories, or an essay in black text." Nice, nice
Mhm.
essay, by the way.
Thank you.
You decided that you're going to explore writing in its entirety. So you
Mm.
you do some work for television. How's that been like? How did you get into that to start with?
So I kind of got into it when I was on maternity leave.
Hmm.
So a friend of mine was looking for a writer for a new show that he was. he was developing. Because
Mm.
this producer actually met me through one of my books. So that's how the relationship was formed. Then he was like, "Can you come and write on the show?" And I said to him, "Look, I have no script writing experience." So he said to me, "Sue, you can write. I've read your books. You know how to write dialogue, which is what really scripts are." So I got roped into this show, and I
Mm.
enjoyed being in the story room and the story lining, which is what a lot of novel writing is, when you the plotting, and so that's how I really became exposed to it. And then I think I got a lot of other TV work through that experience. But then you see, Zuki, I always think that we are guided. I think I honestly believe, because what happened was, after maternity leave, I took like a year of work. I went back into the financial world, and I believe maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have really continued with all the TV stuff. I think I would have been far by now. But yeah, so I think it's just like now I'm back to where I actually started, and I think that's probably where I should have been anyway, because then it's opened other avenues for me to explore as well. So I've just, because I just made a decision. I was like, look, writing novels alone won't sustain me financially. So I need other writing work, because it needs to be creative as well. Otherwise, there's no synergy. Because my previous work was just totally divorced from the writing creatively. So that was the strategy. But yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
We have a question from the audience from Isabel Zigomo, and she wants to know, can we dissect Dagi, please? What was up with his entitlement? Comrade Douglas, what is his story?
So with Douglas, I think what people need to realize, that when a lot of comrades went to war, they went back didn't come back as the same people that they left. You cannot be the
Mm.
same after you've killed people, right? And a lot of these soldiers never got trauma counseling. They had PTSD, but they were just supposed to assimilate into society like nothing ever
Mm.
happened. And that's really what happened with Dagi.
Mm.
I mean, he was a sweet guy before he
So
used to.
Douglas is as traumatized as General
As a
Nyong'o, but in
general,
different ways.
ways,
Mm.
yeah, they're the same people. I mean, that time he's in the bush trying to survive. I mean, he could be literally going out of his mind as well, mentally. Be- You know,
Mm.
his mental state. So that really was what that was the issue with Dagi, and a lot of soldiers. They never really got to deal with the trauma, but they were supposed to just integrate and continue life as normal. I don't know if
Okay.
that answers your question, Isabel.
I think it really does. Well, I don't know, Isabel, you can tell us, but I think it does. Another thing
Mm.
I wanted to know, because you and I have talked about this. Um, what's your, so when you started writing this book, uh, or your other books that you wrote, you know, did you did you come to the Polygamist? Did you come to the Gold Diggers? Did you come to a Family Affair? With a fully formed story, and then you just whatever, or is it like you like, okay, I'm gonna write 500 words today, and then I'll see what I'll edit out, and then I'll write 500 words tomorrow, or do you have a process where you surprise yourself, or your character surprise you, as you proceed? How do you come into your story? Do you
So,
plot everything before you start writing?
so yeah, I'm a plotter in the sense that, yeah, I normally have the story in my head, how it
Mm.
starts, but I allow the characters also to take root, and they do surprise me. Like initially, Usimpiwa was supposed to die in chapter 2, but Usimpiwa kept
Yeah.
coming back to me and saying, "I can't die now. I can't. I have to live." And I was like, "Simpiwa, you can't live. You
Mm.
can't be alive, because for Angel to be orphaned, you need to die." So we had this back and forth with Simpiwe. And then finally I agreed. Okay, I said, fine, I'll keep you alive. And then that's how the whole storyline of Simpiwe came, from her going to the war. And it led me, to a beautiful story. So sometimes you have to let go of your original plans and allow the characters to lead you. So I do a bit of both. It's not
Okay.
really, I'll have an outline, but I don't really stick to it, to the T.
Okay. All right. There's a question from Helenville. Like me as a writer, I tend to be, inspired by books rather than writers. So there's certain books
Mhm.
by different writers. Do you? Which one do you do? Are there some writers who are like, okay, this one, everything they write is the shiz, and I'm going to, you know, I hope in future I can become like them, or hey, if I beat them in a literary prize, I would have like just become the greatest Sunyati myself. Do you what are there writers who inspire you, or is it what you call it? Is it books that inspire you?
Look, they're writers that I think, wow, this writer writes beautifully, right? But I don't necessarily think, okay, I want to write like that. I admire the craft, right? But I tend to learn from writers. So because remember, I don't have a technical writing background. So it's kind
Mm,
of like, for me, I read a lot, and different writers teach me different things, which
mm,
sometimes I bring to my work if I like it. But I don't
mm.
necessarily think I'd want. I believe I have my own writing style. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
so yeah, so I think it's more admiration. I'll be like, wow. And there are lots of writers I admire, but I don't ever say I'd like to beat them. No, it's not like that for me. It's like, I learn. Like, okay, wow, how did they do this? That sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm. All right. Rafilo Kanyaho wants to know, do you struggle with writer's block?
So writer's block, I don't. When I have writer's block, I know there's an issue with my storyline. So that's, for me, it's like a red
It's not
flag that
ready.
yeah, whatever
Yeah,
you're doing is not working.
leave
It's
it.
just, yeah. And so,
I agree.
and
I
I leave it.
agree.
And normally when I do that, I resolve it in my mind. Then I realize, okay, what there's something, it's to me, it's something telling me there's something wrong with where you're going with this. So that's what
Mm,
I call writer's block. And the minute I resolve that issue, things start to flow again. Yeah.
mhm. All right. And she also wanted to know, which perhaps is something similar to a question I was going to ask. I saw in your somewhere that you are working on a follow up to the Polygamist, is it, or a family affair? Is that
Not at
still
all.
happening?
No. No,
No, that's
not
on
at
your
all.
website, ma'am.
Is it? It was written
Eh.
a long time ago. No. At the moment, at the moment, I'm actually ghostwriting a memoir.
Oh,
So it's not
fantastic.
my, yeah, it's not my
Is
work.
it some?
So
Is it someone? Is it someone we know? Is it Kenny Kunene?
it's someone you know, but I can't tell you. But it's someone you do know. I'm sure you do know. So it's
uh,
actually quite interesting because um, memoir territory is, new to
uh,
me. So it's actually
okay.
also quite challenging in the sense that, okay, you know,
Mm,
writing about someone, and being watching someone's life, I kind of feel like a voyeur. Like I'm like it's a peep show and I'm watching what they're doing with their life. But yeah, it's
mm.
interesting. So I want to see how this will pan out. Yeah, it's new territory for me.
Kato would like to know. You said the research took a year. How do you know when you've done enough research? How did you know when you've done enough research for this book?
I had a deadline, so at some point I had to start writing the book. It wasn't. I think if
But
I
you,
didn't have a deadline, I could have carried on. The research was nice. I enjoyed. I really enjoyed the research. It was really nice. Yeah.
uh-huh. So was your deadline because you're like this like six-figure advance or something?
No, come on,
The
Zuti.
people would like to know.
No, in which people people are thinking after that.
The
Was
people
it
would like to know.
no? I wish, after what was it? What, that memoir, was it Mashile? Who was that guy who was paid 12 million? People are
12
looking
million.
at right.
I know. Right? You're like, what have I been doing with my life,
Yeah,
man?
yeah. People were
You
like,
know, I took
writers.
a pause, man. sent a message to Fred. I'm like, you asked me to write articles for you in City Press per word, and yet normal people, other children are getting this amount. What is it? You know?
Yeah.
Mercy Wamboy would like to know what your writing process is. She wants to know whether do you have a set time for writing, or do you write on the go?
No, I have, if I have a deadline. I think also when you start to write full time, you just have a stipulated time. You do it every day. It's like a job, you know. So I have to look at, think how many words am I doing? Is it 1,000 every day? And I have to be disciplined to do it every day. So it's not no longer I can't do it on a whim, like when I feel like it. It's not about feelings anymore. So I think
Okay.
once you commit to it, you have to be disciplined and keep to it. Because writers love to procrastinate. I mean, we avoid writing. We know we have to write, but we can do everything to avoid writing. So you really have to get into a routine. So that works for me, to be.
I don't know, man. I mean, I need to perhaps on that, because I'm actually just seeing Rafilo's question, because
Mhm.
I tend to get possessed by the character when I'm writing.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
I get possessed by my characters. So even if I'll go to bed, and then but then the characters are uh,
Awake.
harassing me. They're awake, and they're like, and then it's like they need to be they they're doing something surprising, and I just have to, what you call
Get
it.
up.
So I don't do like, maybe like sometimes I might do like 4,000 words in one sitting, and
Oh,
other times,
okay. It depends
yeah.
on. Okay.
Yeah, it depends
And
on what the voices in my head are saying.
are saying. So the
Yeah.
problem with me, right? It's not a problem
Mm,
really. It's because I have a young son. So the
mm,
thing is, at some point, I have to switch off as a writer. I
mm,
cannot allow, as much as I would love to do that, I have to switch off. It's like I have to switch off the writer. I have to switch on being a mother, and I have to be
mm,
present. It's quite difficult, like you say, because these voices are in your head. So you have to sit there and also be listening, because sometimes the voices are talking in your head. You also don't want to lose
mm.
what's being said, but you also have to be present for the people around you. So it's kind of like a dilemma in a sense, because like you say, sometimes the story doesn't sleep, even though
Yeah,
you do. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and we've got a comment. This is where we're ending, guys. No more questions, please, please, please. We've got a comment from Tulonga Ndengu, who says, "Mine is not a question, it's an excitement." So he is excited. It's nice to meet Sue today, and truly wishing her the best in her career, writing career.
Thank
I came
you.
across her novel, The Polygamist, early this year, and that's how I got to her work. The Polygamist is likely to form part of my PhD study as one of African
Yoo-hoo!
novels alive. That's how
Thank you.
powerful her work is to me. I think she's born to write. Hoping to read the book discussed today, Sue. Tulonga, please just let me know. Are you a man or a woman? I think you're a woman, because men don't read fiction as much as they should, but I don't want to misgender you. So,
It would
and then
surprise
there
you.
is Akele Wagoma from Kenya, and she says, "Congratulations, Sue. I'm looking forward to reading An Angel's Demise. I am inspired by your work. Considering your background, I'm a journalist and I'm struggling to finish my book, and I'm held back by it's not being good enough. Do people's opinions ever hold you back? How do you know when it's really done? And how do you take in feedback?" Uh, Firstly, if I may just interrupt,
Hmm.
Akele, to start with, sometimes you must not ask opinions of people who are irrelevant. But Sue, take it away.
That's so harsh. But yeah, Zuki's right. Sometimes you need to just switch off the other voices, because we are own, like, I'm also my own worst critic, in the sense that I feel my work is not good enough. So can you imagine when other people tell you your work is not good enough? So sometimes
Mm,
just try not to listen to those voices and just
to
write.
the voices. Mm,
Yeah, and get the book out, and send it to the people in the industry. Let them tell you, you know. But don't be restrained by what people say, because you'll never progress.
And it also helps to send it to people that you actually respect. Tulonga, I don't actually get the mailing list. It's the administration is done by Goethe-Institut Namibia. That's why I was double checking. Thank you for letting me know that. And as I expected, I'm glad to know that yes, you're a sister. And at this point in time, unfortunately, our time has run out. So Detlef has to select our 5 lucky winners for today's discussion. Thank you so much, everybody, for having been part of this audience. Please don't go away until Detlef has announced our 5 lucky winners. Detlef, take it away.
Yes, first of all, I would like to say we had participants from, of course, from Windhoek. We had people joining us from Nairobi and people from the rainy Nairobi as well, from somewhere in South Africa, from Ivory Coast, from Bulawayo, from Cape Town, again from Namibia, and from Polokwane as well, and from Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa is more German, yeah. So that's it for our audience. And I also would like to share, before I do the draw, some news. First of all, it's this page. I would like to bring to your attention that we have got on our website, goethe.de/Namibia. We have a page from Virtually Yours with all the records from the past Virtually Yours, even those from 2021 and 2020. If you missed one of these events, then you can still see the records of the past Virtually Yours. And so I'm also a Wikidata writer. So what I did yesterday, what the day before yesterday, I entered the book on Wikidata and Angel's Demise.
Oh, thank you.
it's now a notable message. And every time when people add on Wikidata or Wikipedia your name, they will straight come across to your book, Angel's Demise.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's it. Pleasure. So, and so now we come to the draw. I've got here my box. I open the box, and you see, I can't see. We had more than 20 people. How many books do we have, actually?
We have 5 as usual, Detlef.
5 as usual. And we have got Helena Ambassa.
Are you here?
Yes, she's still there. Helena, you can unmute. Maybe she's not hearing us at the moment. Okay, let's draw the second one in the meanwhile. So we had Helen. The second one is Tulonga.
Tulonga, congratulations. You get the new Nyathi.
And there's Helen.
Thank you. I'm actually joining you from the village. Thank you so much. Oh no.
Before I forget to announce, please, all the winners, you must send me your postal address so that we can send you the book. Number 3 goes to Refilwe.
Oh, Refilwe.
Where is she?
I know. Wow, thank you very much. I've got another copy, double copy, so I'm going to give it to someone special in my life. Thank you so much.
Okay, where are you joining us from, Refilwe?
Thank you. From South Africa, Soweto.
Oh, great. Number 4 goes to Akele.
Oh.
Akele
She's there. Akile.
Paguma.
Yes, I'm
She's
here. Thank you very much. I'm super happy that I get to win this, and I look forward to reading it.
great. And the last book. Oh, there is somebody still entering here. Let just. So the last one goes to Frida Shivute. Frida, are you still there? No, yeah, sure, she's still there.
She's still there. Wow.
Yes. So we have the 5 winners. Let me just repeat. Yes. We have Helena Ambassa. We have Tulonga Ndegu.
Oh,
We have Frida Shivute, Refilwe, and Akele. I think it's all ladies, isn't it? It's no men.
Yeah. It's a girls' party.
Because
Yeah.
Dekwa is missing. You remember he won 3 times in a
oh
row.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
This one.
So
Oh,
before we close and with our last music part, Sukiswa, who's our next guest?
All right. We are very excited that our next guest is going to be from the Republic of Angola. Kalaf Epalanga, Whites Can Dance Too. And of course,
Wow.
as usual, it's going to be our first Thursday of the month of September, of October rather. And as usual, we'll have 5 copies to give away. And if you're in Nairobi, I understand that Kalaf is going to be in Nairobi for the literary festival that's coming up in a week next week. So look out for him and get him to sign your book. But if not, I will make sure that there's some signed copies for you in to give away for Makondo Festival.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, and before I finish, I am going to ask Nyathi, I should be in Joburg in the next week or so, if possible. Could you sign some of the books for the people that I will actually have access to?
Okay, cool. I'll do that.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
With pleasure. All right. Thank you so much. Enjoyed the
Thank you
conversation.
very much for agreeing to be part of Virtually Yours.